I'm a bit old school and like to go retro, but what if I go new retro? Synthwave, Vaporwave, Retrowave, Microwave, whatever you want to call it, it's bold and flashy and reminds us of a time that never actually was. Flying cars and huge glowing buildings, digital roads and neon signs. It's the future we thought we'd have. Well, what if we channel that into our futuristic miniatures and use those bright, vibrant colors to create a color scheme? This week, I'm painting up a Robot Legions biker from One Page Rules. It's the inspiration for this video as it has that feeling of a futuristic floating bike, flying down the roads with alien engine sounds, warbling as it passes by. And to keep things interesting, since I feel like Robot Legions do need some metallic on them at all times, I'm actually going to include some Synthwave metallics. And it all starts with this color, Magenta. As a CKMY primary, it can make a lot of colors when mixed. Purples, reds, and oranges, pretty much the whole side of a color wheel. So I'll be using it as the starting point for every color, which is why I'm giving my model a starting spray of it over a gray primer base, because I want it vibrant. The robot itself is going to have most of the metallic, along with some of the internal parts of the hover cycle. And it all starts with the magenta and a gold. In this case, Viking gold from scale 75. When it comes to the magenta, for all of these, I'm always going to be adding just a bit of white to it, since I prefer it to start lighter than dark. In my testing, if it starts too dark, we lose a bit of the vibrancy that we're going for. This then gets base coated over every part of the robot's body and seating compartment, but also the undersides of the motorbike itself, the spines, and the weapon rail at the back, as well as all the little patches of broken plates around the chassis of the bike. Already, this will have a really neat effect of having a yellow tint and a magenta tint depending on the angle you view it from. Also, like any base coat, we're still going to want to do 2 coats of this just to make sure it's even. From here, it's just going to be a lot of layering, but always going back to the base mix, which is why I mixed up a lot of it. For the first layer, I'm just going to add some more of the Viking gold, but make sure it's still got a little bit of that magenta tint. Then I'll layer this up on the metallic parts as the start of my highlights. So I'm actually not going too heavy with this because I want to leave quite a bit of that magenta metallic underlayer. For the next layer, I'm introducing a new lighter gold, but still quite orangish. In this case, it's Dwarven gold from scale 75. This gets thinned out but also mixed in with a little bit of the original mix so that it reintroduces some of that magenta to it, because I want that magenta to run throughout. This is where I start to pick out where the light streaks are going, centering this within my highlight areas where I think they'll be most impactful, along the robot's shoulders and body, and on the weapon rail, a few places centered between the connectors. Once again with another metallic, once again a little lighter, Amber Alchemy from scale 75, and as before, the base mix with the magenta added to it. Now I'm just picking out the point highlights, so this gets small little areas within the last layer to get me those brightest points, but not quite edge highlighting, as that's my next and final layer. One more to go, and this time I'm just adding a mid-range silver to the last mix to give me something brighter, but still orange metallic and magenta. With this, I just want to add point highlights and edge highlights around the areas I highlighted with the last layer. Not too much, just enough to give that ping of light. In the CKMY color wheel, yellow and magenta make red, but using more yellow than magenta, you can also get an orange. So with just 2 colors, I can get this whole gamut from magenta to red to orange to yellow. And that's the plan. I'll start by actually making all the mixes, using the magenta with a bit of white to start, and a golden or warm yellow on the other side, but also adding some white to it, so there will be white throughout. Any yellow should work for this, but a warm or golden yellow will have that Synthwave sunset look I'm going for, and make a much nicer red in the middle. So I'll do about 5 layers or so, and make 5 mixes. The magenta with a bit of yellow for a red, then just more and more yellow each time, giving me my oranges and my light yellow at the other end. From here, it'll be a process of layering, so I'll show how that's going to work on just a couple of the front plates. But this yellow is going to go all along the wheel and on the driver's head and arms. Since I've already started with the base of the magenta, I'm going to move on to the light red. I have to ask myself how I want this to emanate from the wheel. A simple way would just be to have the inside start with the magenta and the outside be the yellow, which I'll show off later how to do very easily. But for now, what I'm going to do is have the light point emanate out from the center of each plate, which means I'll start at the back center, then pull it through the middle and have it bow out towards the edges. I'll do the same on the side edges as well. Once I have that outline, I'll glaze the red towards those midpoints to get started on my blending, but leaving a bit of the magenta near the back. From here, I'll follow the same step for each subsequent color, starting with the dark orange, repeating the outline of the red and glazing it towards the edges, then the light orange, though not pushing it up as far along the blade, so we still have some of those other colors showing. The final solid yellow-white mix gets the corners and the very center, the bright highlight to finish off the setting sun of our wheel. Now I did say there was a nice easy way to do this too, and that'd be to wet blend, starting by just lightening up the underlayer a bit so it comes out nice and vibrant, adding some of the yellow on the model first along the edge afterwards. Since we're only going from one color to another, it means all this mixing can happen naturally on the model. And while we won't get the interesting pattern, with just a dab of magenta on the tip of a brush saturated in the yellow, we do get this. Do that twice and you'll have a quick gamut of bright reds, oranges, and yellows with very little work. Yellow isn't the only magic color when it comes to magenta, because with some blue or teal, we can get a really spectacular mix of purple for a shadow when blending out from the magenta. So that's what we're going to do for the side plates of the bike to really cement this as a synthwave color scheme, with the same kind of mix as the yellows. Starting by making the teal, using some phthalo blue and phthalo green, and of course mixing in enough white to make it bright enough to be nice and vibrant. On the other end, just the magenta with the white. So once again, white throughout to keep things vibrant. And I'll mix up 5 or so layers in between, making a nice purple at one end with the magenta and teal, and working to the pure teal again. So for how to layer this onto the plates of the bike is actually quite a simple concept. In this instance, we want to pretend there's a light right above it. The way it casts onto a flat plate is actually the opposite of how you think it does. So the light point isn't on the edge towards the light, but actually at the bottom of it. So to start my layering, I'll be pulling the layers down towards the bottom edge of each plate, though edge highlights would still go at the top. The method here is the same as for the yellow. I block in the layer on the plate with the next color, then where it transitions, I'll thin down the paint and glaze between that transition point. First was the purple. This last one was the next stage up, and this one is about the mid-mix, where we're starting to see much more teal and lightness. So I want this as my halfway point for the plate as well. For the second to last layer, I just want to get the last quarter of the plate. And the final layer, I'll be a little different with. I'll start at the corners and feather the teal out from there, so that it covers the full bottom edge, but also up the sides a bit, just to get a little roundness in there, which helps separate out the plates a bit. Last thing to do is add a tiny bit of white to the pure teal mix and add wear and edging. Since this is just a brightly colored physical object, there's no reason we can't add a bit of wear and tear and texture. I'll highlight every edge to separate out the plates, but also add thin scratches in random places. Though near the base where the light gathers, I might put a few extra, since that's where imperfections would catch more light. And if you're in a hurry, this can be done the exact same way as the quick yellow way, though since these plates are flat, a flat brush works really well to create the gradient. Just put the teal on one side of the brush, the magenta on the other, then blend them on your palette. Then when doing the wet blend, always move the flat head out towards the teal side so that the last part it always paints will always be that pure teal. can't leave it there. All this magenta and we haven't left anything magenta. So I propose some pink neon glow, and the lines between all these plates seems like a good place to do it. Starting with a rebase coating of the magenta and white mixed I used to start the model with. Next up is to set up the glow points. I need a sharp thin brush and way more white. With a lot of finesse and a perfect model positioning, I'll paint a few straight lines in the center of each of these veins. It's going to be really light compared to the pink around it, but I'll be glazing it down in a second. To do the glazing, I'll use an in-between mix of the starting magenta and the bright white one, starting just outside of the center of the line and pulling the glaze towards the corners, so there's a nice little gradient between a light center and a pink edge. I only needed to finish up a few other things. The monitor and the cockpit, as well as a few extra cables and the like around the robot itself. I'm ecstatic with how this turned out. When I did my tests, it was actually quite dark, going over a darker base and without the white being mixed in at first. But with that white in all the mixes keeping things light and vibrant, it's the color that's creating the shift and not the lightness. I'm also really happy with how well the metallic actually works at the scheme as well, making sure there's still some mechanical mixed in with the vibrant glow of Synthwave. Please subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this one, or just other fun things to do with painting miniatures. And until next time, enjoy your own painting journey.